today, what I wanted to start off with is bullying is the second leading cause of death between people. Well, suicide is the second leading cause of death for people between the ages of 10 and 34. And a lot of times bullying is at the root of that suicide. 1 in 5 students are bullied, report bullying at school. That's 20%. 20% of students at school report that they get bullied. Bullied youth are at risk of depression, anxiety, lower school achievement, higher dropout rates, sleep problems. So bullying has physical and emotional consequences. So it's so important that we consider bullying at the same level we consider things like addiction. Now we all want to be trauma informed. Well, this has everything to do with being trauma informed, is addressing bullying head on. Students who are bullied or cyberbullied are twice as likely to attempt suicide. We've seen this. I mean, this has happened just over and over and over again in our lives. There's no question. So we are witnessing right now. We watched George Floyd be bullied to death on national TV. So bullying is an imbalance of power. The system is flawed, not broken. It was never built in the first place. It was created on beliefs that were just fundamentally wrong about power and difference. And so we need to rebuild systems from the ground up. We need to redo this. If you think about automobiles joining our reality, when cars were invented, we weren't prepared for cars. And so we had to build roads, and we had to build signs, and we had to build maps, and we had to do all kinds of stuff to build the system to manage automobiles in our lives. Well, here we are. We have so much information about neuroscience and the understanding of imbalance of power that we now need to build roads. We need to build maps. We need to build a system that can incorporate the balance of power around differences and difference. So I hope that makes sense, and please ask questions and comment and send me messages later and we can dig deeper, because like I said, we might talk about this tomorrow too. Bullying is terrifying. Let's be honest. Like, nobody wants to be bullied. I have been bullied in my adult life, which is just like probably the worst thing. I won't go into that, but it was horrible. And we have very few skills in dealing with what to do when we're bullied. Like I said, it's a total imbalance of power, and it happens at home. It can happen online, cyberbullying through social media. It can happen at school in a physical situation. It happens in neighborhoods, and it happens in the workplace. So bullying I've heard a lot of talk about the fear of students being home and their risks of depression and anxiety and even suicide. We've had a few events where, youth who've been home from school over COVID-19 have actually completed suicide. And this is tragic, no question. But before we jump to the conclusion that that's because they're home from school, we really need to look at the big, gigantic picture around other things like cyberbullying. I looked at this concept sort of through a different lens. At home, when youth are dealing with cyberbullying and they're isolated, that can create a whole different level of stress when you don't have your peer group to support you in dealing with it, and your parents are completely unaware that cyberbullying is going on. So parents, super important to be connected. Teachers, really important to be connected with youth's social media and the reality of cyberbullying and how to manage that. Also, kids who are bullied at school might be thriving right now in COVID-19 at home, basically because they have a refuge from their abusers. So there's a lot of different angles to look at this. It's not simple, and we need to really investigate. And there's probably a little bit of both of that going on. Usually hard questions come back with complicated answers. They're not one and dones. So ideally, we raise children who are resilient and able to sort of overcome and face adversity. And one of those adversities is bullying. And when I say that, I make it sound simple. It's not simple, because it starts in infancy and it requires really thinking through all of your communication from infancy into adolescence and young adulthood. And so one of the examples that I give is if somebody comes to me head on in a bullying situation, or to a teenager, middle schoolers are the classic bullying group. So if they are hit head on with some comment like, oh my gosh, you're so ugly, or oh my gosh, you're, why are you wearing those pants, or whatever, something unkind like that. No audience, no show. I've talked about that before. If kids can learn strategies for responding to things that catch them off guard, that are unkind, like, oh, I wonder what would make you be so worried about my pants, or I wonder why you would say something like that that's so unkind, and that can throw off the conversation. And adults can do that as well. But when we teach children to meet that kind of negativity head on in a way that's not reactive, but really sort of responsive and almost has a hint of compassion to it, it can throw somebody off and really open up a dialogue. So it's not about winning the fight. It's about figuring out why the fight is somewhere there in the first place. So remember ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. We really can't talk about bullying without talking about trauma. And because trauma is often the root of bullying or bullies. And the mix can be deadly. Like I said, suicide is the second leading cause of death for teenagers, 10 years old to 34 years old. And bullying usually happens around race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and socioeconomic status. There's obviously all kinds of things that are at the root of bullying. However, those seem to be like little niche targets that bullies hone in on and go after people. Bullying is really, at its heart, a failed communication of untreated trauma. So let me say that again. It's failed communication. We need to get better at teaching people to communicate well and to communicate clearly in ways that resolve differences and misunderstandings. So people don't bully unless they themselves have been bullied and suffered trauma. So when somebody comes at you as a bully, we know right off the bat that there's some sort of trauma and imbalance of power in their lives that's creating this behavior, because we know behavior has meaning. Children who don't understand things that are happening to them often act that out in negative ways, which draw a negative attention from adults, and that's where we get to address it through healthy communication. We need to open our eyes and see all of this through a completely different lens, or a new lens. Perpetrators, the lens, good morning, Ori, the lens of trauma, what's going on, and the victim, the lens of resilience, how do I respond? I like to think of bullying in these terms, because if we think about the bullier as, okay, we need compassion towards their trauma, but the bullied, we need to support and protect and pull for their purpose and resilience and their capacity for handling hard things. Because that's really what allows us to be resilient, is the ability to overcome adversity. But usually people can't do that unless they're supported by others and taught how to do that. So we know things today that we didn't know before. We know that there's a neurobiology in our brain that responds to differences. I feel like I talk about this every day, but I just don't want it to get missed. We respond to differences as threats. So any kind of difference that comes into our experience or our lens in our world, we're going to go, whoa, that's different. I should be scared because maybe it's going to attack, maybe it's going to put my survival at risk. That's good. Being aware of what could harm you or kill you keeps us alive. And it was really, really important in hunter and gatherer days when we didn't have shelter and all of these things. So, but now we know exposure to difference early in life wires the brain differently. And exposure creates wiring and neuroconnections that respond more quickly to the prefrontal cortex. We want that worrying part of our brain to jump to the frontal part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, and say, oh yeah, it's okay. That difference is safe. Color, like skin color, shades of skin color. Oh yeah, that's okay. That was just, my brain did a little micro jump and now it's fine. Resolved, safe. Better yet, lower by exposure early on. So those neuroconnections are highly, we call it myelinated, which means that there's like a fatty sheath over it, which allows information to move more quickly. So that would make the reaction time even faster from fear to no, it's okay. So we want there to be minor differences. Everybody, okay, remember, now they're in alarm mode. That's their amygdala jumping off, and they haven't allowed it to get to their prefrontal cortex yet. So we want to lower the response and reaction to minor differences like skin color, sexual orientation, disability or different abilities, language differences, gender, all these things really that aren't threats to our survival, but they are differences. Instead, respond to modern day real threats. Oh, somebody's carrying a gun. Yeah, your amygdala should go off and you should be like, wait a second. A whole bunch of people just went into the Michigan State House carrying automatic weapons and guns and nobody did anything. Okay, amygdala firing, I'm scared, I'm worried, and yeah, there's no easing of my tension around that. My brain doesn't know how to deal with the idea that a large group of people could enter a government building carrying automatic assault rifles. So that's what our modern day amygdala should be reacting to as a real threat. Not skin color, not sexual orientation or gender difference. These are things that we need to wire our brains to be just the norm, the typical. Our micro emotions, though, remember, our micro emotions are those instant messages that we send across our face, reading the system that alert us to real threat. So if you find yourself feeling like you have power over someone else that you fear, something's wrong and you need to stop, look, listen, and learn. Immediately, I'm going to use George Floyd's the situation as an example. Immediately, the white police officer, all four of them, they have power over George Floyd due to skin color, race. Now, then, right off the bat, so an appropriate response would not be to overpower. That creates a bullying situation, which is exactly what it was, to death, bullying to death. They would stop and say, okay, I already hold, okay, hold on one sec, pause. I already hold more power over this man because of my skin color. So I can handle this situation with less power and physical force. That didn't happen. So alarms going off in all of our heads with, oh my gosh, what in the world is wrong with the situation? This is called, we have a word for it. This is literally called discrimination. Treating somebody differently and as a threat based on a difference. So bullying, again, I'm just going to say it. Try to log this in your brain. Bullying is an imbalance of power that's used to hurt or harm somebody else. So unconscious. I'm going to give you an example of it being highly unconscious. Example, and I'm going to use something fairly neutral. Men versus women. Men often say things and describe things using fewer words than women do. Now, you could just think that like, oh yeah, women talk a lot. Women talk more. Okay, no, not really. Men have more power, so people listen to their words more intensely, so they need to use fewer words in order to get a point across. This is unconscious. Women are not listened to as intently, so they use more words to describe a similar or same situation because they have to in order to get their point across and be understood. So white men are especially listened to more intently. If women communicated, or if a woman communicates like a man, then guess what happens? She's not called like, oh, wow, she's like, that's really smart, or I should listen to her more. No, she's called unclear, confusing. So being aware of, okay, men use fewer words to describe things than women do. Instead of just thinking that that's the norm, like that's just a gender difference. It's not a gender difference. It's a power imbalance between men and women. And so our response to these two different genders around this are different. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. All right. So when we're talking about empathy, which I did an entire episode on empathy, but remember, our default for empathy is it like me? So my default is I'm more empathetic to people who look like me, sound like me, are like me. And that's not good enough. We can't just continue to have our education system teach from a Judeo-Christian, Euro-American perspective. Like, this has been a problem for a long time. Our systems, I think Brene Brown mentioned it in a meme somewhere, but we don't have systems to rebuild. We need to build systems because they were built based on flawed thinking. And it's not anyone's fault that it's flawed thinking. It's just out of date thinking that we now know things and we know what the problems are for these systems. So we have to build them from the place of knowing. Just like building the roads and the highways and the maps to make way for cars, we now need to build the road, the highway, and the maps to make way for a society that values equality across race, gender, sexual orientation, and a variety of other differences. Cynthia writes, I didn't realize until I started working at another facility that what I had experienced, which was unwarranted aggressive actions, was a form of bullying from adults. Absolutely. Adults are bulliers too. Like, this isn't something that is housed in childhood or adolescence. That, people grow up to be bullies, and sometimes adults bully children. So we can't just reform. We have to redesign and rebuild our systems to be fully inclusive. That's not done by adding on. It's accomplished by reweaving the blanket. people say, let kids work it out. You know, kids are bullied at school. Let them work it out on their own. Kids will be kids. It's going to be fine. No, that's not true. If you've ever been bullied, the whole point of bullying is to pick on somebody who can't work it out on their own. So kids and teens and adults really can't deal with bullying all by themselves, or even with their small little group. We're not doing enough to address the threat, the harm, and the meanness of bullies. Schools are not doing enough either. Granted, 76% of schools have bullying programs that are trying to address bullying. The most effective way to address bullying isn't direct teaching, it's peer-supported bullying programs where peer want to carry out the anti-bullying programs, not teachers, not administrators, students, peer-to-peer. So for those school districts who are doing that, spot on, right on, high five. I love that. But for those who are just trying to take the just say no red ribbon campaign approach to bullying, the most failed drug program in history that we still continue to pour money into and just say no, it doesn't work, folks. It doesn't work. And we could easily take that money from that program and stop putting red ribbons on chain link fences around schools every single year and move that money over to peer-to-peer bullying programs. So just say no is never the answer. The answer is trauma, informed care, and education that addresses the whole social, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, physical well-being of a child and community. So COVID-19 and George Floyd, the George Floyd murder. Let's not just say George Floyd. Let's call it what it is. The George Floyd murder colliding at the exact same time can teach us so many lessons. We're at a transformation in history, and we need to work together to build new systems that reflect our values and our understanding of our neurobiological system, that address our fear that there are not enough pieces of the pie. Because one of the things about bullying and about race relations and about discrimination, it's about, oh my gosh, if we give them more, then I'm going to have less. But the truth really is that if we give others more, we all really get more. When we give back, we get more in return. Like, this is one of those corny sayings, love is like a magic penny. Hold it tight and you won't have any. Lend it, spend it, you'll have so many, they'll roll all over the floor. Well, that is how shared, resilient values and communities are built. When we give away, we get back more. Money has never been the thing that makes people happy. Ask anybody. They've interviewed people on their deathbeds endlessly. And people say, I wish I'd spent more time doing things that met up with my values, having relationships, being connected to other people. People don't say, I wish I had more money at the end of my life, or I wish I had 3 more houses or boats or whatever. So what we strive and work for should reflect our values. And I think today I'm going to end with this about bullying, but I'm going to add tomorrow, and we're going to talk specifically more targeted about cyberbullying and bullying of children at school and what parents can do about that, and what teachers can do about that, and what administrators can do about that. Because We all need to be part of the system that fixes it. Ori says, I was involved in a panel meeting once, and I was the only one on the panel that was male and not a psychologist. What ensued later on was the most sexist thing I had ever experienced because, and now I can't read because it cut off, my fellow something. So I'll have to read that in the comments later. My fellow, are you going to read it to me? My fellow, hold on, pause. Ori.
My fellow panelists were females, the patient and his facility.
My fellow panelists were female. Oh, I'm getting it. Hold on. My fellow panelists were female. The patient and the facilitator continued for 2 months to undermine the panel's discussion and plan for the patient. An email went out and started a war between all the psychologists and myself that were included. I finally spoke up and stated that what was happening was extremely undermining the process, and we were not doing anything for those who are his victims or us as his facilitators. The drama stopped after that, but it was an old boys club. I was disgusted. Yeah, so that often happens is that what we do is we end up justifying bullying, or we take a defensive stance against bullying, like, oh, they can work it out. It's, that person started it or whatever. And rather than hitting it head on with open communication, and then there's underlying dialogue that can happen behind the scenes in middle school and high school, and even with adults, where there's that peer-to-peer interaction and there's a ganging up, which is also bullying. And so it really is a matter of learning how to communicate better and in ways that are more clear, and using language that's more inclusive and appropriate, which all takes time to learn how to do. So I'm going to wrap up with that right there, and we're going to talk about the impact or the ability to help students and young people not only confront people who might bully them, but also enlist people to support them if they are bullied. And then 3, and probably most importantly, to teach our young people to step up and protect and support other people who are being bullied, who don't necessarily have the support circle around them. So that's really why they end up being victims, is because they're isolated and they make easy targets for perpetrators who want to harm. So with that, I love you. Let's move on to bullying strategies tomorrow. And I hope you have a fabulous day, and I look forward to seeing you in the morning. Bye. Thank you.